In the last 3 years, we had done so many competitions for different museums. This is the Reina Sofia in Madrid, where every gallery has a different configuration, like a kind of piled up landscape. And that what it does is that these voids which are created become also kind of natural courtyards for outdoor exhibits, but also for the visitors to view these very elaborate structures. The paintings really were never really seen as an isolated piece. I mean, in this show we don't have the, let's say, all the plans, but they were never seen as an isolated element. They were always seen as part and parcel of a large ensemble of drawings. There were all the line drawings, all the plans, all the sections, which are not in the show because of lack of space, but they were never seen as just, you know, a painting. It was not seen. But I think it started off with two things. One, which is to challenge the idea of presentation 25 years ago when I was a student, which I did not think the current mode of presentation would allow me to explore space in the way I can. This really before computing was available to all of us, and three-dimensional kind of exploration. And the other thing was the idea of the projection, which I think became a very important component. That the projection of the drawing becomes the way kind of start the idea of kind of deformation, distortion through projections allows you to look at the building in very different ways. So every time you look at the project, you look at it completely differently, and that really became a design process. It was no longer really only about a fixed image of the building. So it became a very elaborate way, a tool to sketch these things in a very, very complex and elaborate way. And I think it allowed for a degree of complexity. I think, for example, if you look at all these drawings, which they're not really only about the project, because the project, let's say, is here, but the rest is the city. And ultimately, the kind of complexity of the city began to kind of be pulled in onto the side, so it allows for a degree of kind of program complexity and spatial complexity, which we didn't have that possibility before. So these two things occurred at the same time, and I think it also obviously had a tremendous impact on the quality of light and the idea of light and transparency of the buildings and the way the shift in geometry to allow you for this kind of really possibility of what it would be like to kind of to expose these compartments and spaces. I mean, I really love doing them, you know, but there aren't the people who can set them up anymore. I mean, if you ask some of these kids to transfer a drawing for me on black paper, for example, they can't do it. You know, it took thousands of years to achieve, you know, incredible kind of graphic refinement up to 10, 15 years ago, and disappeared in 5 years. They can't even draw a line. It's like there is no power in the hand. It's bizarre and sad. You know? So it diminishes every day. First they can't do inking, now they can't do sketching, then they can't do models. It's just like, I don't know what it's like, but it's like, you know, calculating. You know, people used to be able to add and calculate things, phenomenal numbers, but nobody does it anymore. These are all the peak drawings, very early drawings. This is the idea of the kind of slabs of the peak moving across the sky, the kind of the mountains. And I must say, I mean, what is interesting if you look at this drawing and the world, the idea of the background as a landscape, which was the backdrop of the building, becomes eventually the project. And 20 years later, it becomes the project. Very early model also of the different layers, but also what has become central, and I think it became a central in all our work, is this idea of the void or the public space, which is accessible to everybody. So that becomes really, I think, another project, apart from the idea of the landscape and topography and lightness and things floating around and so on. The idea of a space in any building which is civic space, which is accessible to everybody, apart from, and also the idea of juxtapositions connecting to the infrastructure, but the idea of the void or the space, I mean, it doesn't have to be a void, but the idea of making space which is open to all becomes really, I think, a central story in most of the projects. And I would say start more elaborately in the peak. So in this particular case, in the big case, and like for example, these are all different. The idea that these apartments are all transient, so you can rent them, so like a hotel. This is the kind of the club or the park with a pool and library and different platform for resting. And these are the two top beams, which are all apartments and penthouses. So finally, in the original brief, there were 3 different sites and 3 different buildings, and then it was transformed into one single building, but made of many components, and these components meant different programs. So it's no longer about a building for housing, a building for the club, a building for the hotel, but one building which has very different diversity of program. This is also studies of all the interiors, the different spaces. So these are kind of combining really research into the quality of the interior and looking at the drawing, at the same time. And these drawings eventually, of course, affected the next project. One says all these things about, that if you you pull out from the interior these lines to the exterior, it has an impact on the way you experience the interior space. But when the Cincinnati opened, when I went into that space, when it was all finished, these kind of moves do actually make an impact on the way you use the building. There's no question about it. I mean, you are there, but because of the internal geometry, you are suddenly kind of propelled to the outside, or you're propelled to the inside. And I think it's the idea of kind of the seamless movement through the staircases, the overlay of all the staircases, and how they really pulled the building together. All the things which we talked about actually did work. Interesting. And it's a very small project, a small building. But because of the maze-like quality, it feels, in a way, bigger than it is, only on a few levels. But these moves really, almost to my surprise and amazement, they do work. And that was very exciting. I mean, I was excited by this kind of really strange moments in the project when you suddenly kind of, you're, propelled out through the building. And so the idea that, we did the idea of the transparency of the ground, how the street is, how the kind of ground moves in, then you pulled up through the building, through this kind of staircase ramps. The composition of the objects as they kind of rest over each other, allowing for one volume to be transparent, like the offices. So suddenly, some of the gallery spaces are pierced by these offices. Different galleries above and different materials. How it connects to kind of the immediate urban scales. The larger urban scale and how the building then, in terms of its edge, relates to the kind of different vistas of the city. It's a very small corner, but the idea that it's made of many components and it kind of adds to its complexity. And also when you stand here in the balcony, you look out and you frame segments of the city, and therefore the city also feels much bigger than it is. So this display between the city and the building. There are some photographs really very similar to some of these paintings, and many people thought they were models. They were not real images. And this kind of, again, going back to Tommy Guy, where the staircases become not only, they're not kind of stacked over each other, but they are slightly shifting to allow you to kind of to feel space differently. So these kind of gestures and moves, which sometimes people kind of, the cynics think don't really matter, but they did actually do matter, and they do work in terms of the interior organization of this project. Then let's go and show the seamlessness of the line. These are drawings which we did during the competition. These are all done by me because it was like a very elaborate kind of design process showing these kind of different streams, how they would work, and then looking at the thinner, the smaller streams. The idea of all these louvers and how they kind of light the field or the underfield, so that to allow transparency of the building. Rome as a field of the city and as its actual composition. Different studies of this kind of machine, on one hand machine-like space, but also at the same time a field of many elements. Looking at some of these are all the site photographs, but they're quite early because now they must be a year old now. The thing is already built up. This is the view from the underside of the building. So if you arrive on site, that's how you will move through it. You see these objects, and then you can either see through the auditorium or you go up to look into the building. Different ways of exploring that space. The section in this project, I think, is very, very interesting. There's the field of the car park in Strasbourg, and the roof. This is like an idea of two fields, black and white, the field of the roof, field of the ground, tarmac, white and black, lighting, dark, day and night. So it's like basically only three colors: silver, black and white, metal, concrete, and tarmac. We received the Mies Prize for this in May, European prize, and the idea that one is a tilted field and one is slightly kind of folded field with a roof. The roof was also poured in one single go, so it's quite innovative as a kind of way of constructing this building. We done? Yeah, it's like 10 years old, this thing. I love this photograph. You don't think it's funny? Just two things together. I mean, I think that we have a lot of work, but I think considering the whole specter, I think we should have more work. I mean, I'm not complaining, but and we're busy, but it's taken unnecessarily a long time to get here for no reason, really.
What are the reasons?
I think that prejudice, primarily. Not about, me being a woman or a foreigner or whatever, but about, about the non-believing of the realm of the possibility. I think that took a long time. Which, I think, in all these years I've always really enjoyed the work and enjoyed myself, and I think that contributed, let's say, to the discourse of architecture, but still took a long time. So, no reason. If you look at it from here, the idea of this ice storm, this installation, stretches out and meets objects or pieces which we're designing. So it becomes, these are kind of in production. And the whole thing could be in production. But so this is one sofa we're doing in America. And this is an installation, an opera set we did recently in Graz in January. So this idea that the ground begins to unfold to release the underworld.